Dave with Heavy Lifting Industries, talking storyboards in Blender again. So I was working on the shoot that I'm planning on working on this year, which is a brand new hell. So those are the storyboards that I was working on in my previous video. And as I was working through that, I realized that there were some process things that were taking me a while, that it was making things a little bit kind of weird and awkward to work on. I also had another project that I wanted to get storyboards together for, and that's this one. And since this one is a little less complex, it's a little smaller, I had a lot of the materials in front of me to get it done, I decided to walk through this one first, just to try and get things up and moving. So these are the storyboards for Mommy, There's a Monster in My Closet, which is a very simple concept, and as we go through, you'll kind of see what's going on. Also, the output from the storyboards is actually at the end of this video. So the last minute or so is the actual storyboards that were captured as part of this process. So this film is something that I'm planning on shooting in my own home. This is one of the bedrooms in my house. This is the furniture that's in there. When we were working on changing that room around, I had started working in Blender to model everything so that we could put things in the room and kind of line them up the way they were supposed to sit, so we could actually see what it looked like before we bought the furniture, before we got it into the room, before we started moving shit around. So this is a bedroom in my house, and this is the hallway in my house, and all that furniture was already pre-created. So all I had to do was drop it into this file and start moving it around. There's a lot of playing around here while I'm just trying to get my view set up so that I can see where everything is, that I can get everything done the way I want to get it done. I'm making the doors for the closet here. So there's 2 sliding doors in this closet. Working through the process of just creating something basic to see how it looks and to make sure that I've got appropriately sized doors for this. They don't need to be perfect. They just need to be there, right? Creating the 2 doors, dropping in a camera, and it's dark because I have no light in this room. So bringing the light over, and there we go. Got my doors. It's looking good. This is important because there's a monster in the closet, so we need to have the closet up and working appropriately to get this done. These doors are also mirrored, so I just inset a little bit at the beginning there so that I could put a texture on it that is separate. So in this case, I did it wrong. I made it super bright. It takes me a little bit to get through here. Again, this is one of those things where I'm not super comfortable with it. So it looks like I have a reflective surface on there. Based on the angle that I'm at, it looks like, okay, yep, we're reflecting purple from the walls there. And it looks like a mirror until you get to a better angle. And then when I got to a better angle, you could see it wasn't actually reflecting. So it was reflecting, but it wasn't giving me that mirror image that I was looking for. So I made a quick change here. I went ahead, changed the shader to make it more reflective, so it actually does look like a mirror in the context of what's going on here. I wasn't quite sure what I was planning on shooting, so I wanted to make sure that I had those mirrors since they were actually in there, but it doesn't actually become a problem in terms of the shots that I end up getting for this. So I've moved on to a new file here at this point because I'm trying to test something out. I have no idea how to do fabric simulations in Blender, or at least before I did this, I had no idea. So I was kind of working my way through the process of trying to set up a basic cloth simulation as well as translucent shaders on an object and a light source within that object itself. So the way that this film is supposed to start is with a child underneath a sheet in a darkened room with a light underneath, a tablet, a flashlight, whatever. You know, that kind of a kid sitting up at night after the lights are out and they're not supposed to be up anymore. So I really need to make sure that I can get this cloth simulation at least somewhat working, as well as the translucent fabric and the light source. The reason is because lighting is going to be kind of important for this shoot. It's taking place in a darkened room with kind of minimal lights on it. I need to kind of get a sense for whether the lighting that I'm actually planning on, whether it's actually going to work or not, and how much work it's going to take me to get it done. So you can see here, I'm completely failing at getting this cloth simulation to do what I want it to do. Now, eventually I get it here. It's kind of working. It's excellent. I've got my translucent shader on there. I've got a light inside. Throw a couple walls up around it. You can see I'm getting a little casting up on the walls here, which is interesting. That's kind of what I'm checking to see. And as I move around, you can see I'm getting some shadows from the object blocking the light underneath the cloth simulation. Try a couple things here because I kind of want to see if I can get the sheet to hang over the bed. I don't know why. This is me spending time doing things that I don't need to do in the context of getting my storyboards together. This is completely frivolous. I do not need to do this. Even in this dark room, you can't even see that it's falling over the edge of the bed. So what's the purpose of me doing this? Who knows? It's good to explore. It's good to try and figure some new stuff out. But it really didn't do much for me in that context. So I've created a new file here. I've imported my bed, which is the bed that I want to have here, put some temporary walls up around it, because now that I've proven that I can do this, I need to see how much work it's going to be for me to plop in a character, put a sheet over top of them, have that deform as a cloth simulation, put that light in, and see how it looks kind of in the context of a room. So I'm taking a little bit of time just to get all of this set up, because the last thing I want to do is put this into my actual staging file. You know, I've already got a project set up. The project's in pretty decent shape. I don't want to mess with it too much. I don't want to make it so that I have to go back in and fix stuff later or potentially ruin things that I've got set up. I'm not as confident in Blender as I should be. In this context, I was just sizing her. Everything in the room was built off real proportions, so I wanted to make sure that her height was appropriate to that. So all I did there was just create a plane, scale that plane to, I think it was roughly 5 feet tall, maybe 5'2", turned on the measurement marker so I could actually see what that measurement looked like, and then just scaled her roughly to that so that she's kind of in the ballpark for this. This is a Mixamo skin mesh that I grabbed here. So you can get free characters from Mixamo, and then there's a Mixamo plugin, which you can see along the bar here on the right in this main view here, that allows you to add rigs to a character automatically. And that's all I'm doing here. I do not have the time, the patience, or the expertise to actually model these characters or set up a rig for them. If it can all be done automatically for me and I can move it around, that's great. So I've basically got what I need here. I've got her sitting on the bed. She's kind of in this position where she might be looking at a tablet or something. Now I just need to create the cloth simulation over top of her, which is the sheet that she's supposed to be under. And despite the fact that I spent a little time already working on this, I still fail several times going through this process. So you can see that it's kind of an iteration process. And I think this is important. I think there's so many people out there that are trying to put out tutorials to show you how to do awesome things, right? And the problem is that they've worked on it and they've rehearsed it and they've gone through it a dozen times or more to try and get it into that, 5 to 20 minute bite-sized piece that you see. And you're like, oh man, this is great. And I know how to do this now, but it feels like you don't know what you're doing because you're watching this person who's going step for step for step for step. You do this, you do this, you do this, and it's done. And you're there. And it's like, wow, how do these people get to, they're not doing that off the top of their head. They have worked that out in advance so that they can give you that bite-sized piece of information. You don't see this as much. You don't see people fumbling around trying to figure things out and get them to work the way that they want them to. So if you look at this video, it's only 30 minutes, and that includes the bumper at the end, which is the actual storyboards that I output as part of this project. But this is 10 times normal speed as a time lapse. Just this alone is over 5 hours worth of me sitting in front of the computer futzing around with stuff, trying to figure out how to make it all work. So I finally got that cloth simulation done, imported my character, realized that I needed to scale her again to get her to a proper height. She's pretty close, so it was just a minor change there. I have a better way of doing that in the future. I'm actually going to put the plane inside of that character so I can make sure that they line up exactly the height that I want them to, but that's a minor thing that I've learned along the process here. So I've got her on the bed, trying to get her back into that position again. This is back in this proper scene. Moving forward at this point, I'm trying to get my scene set up. So you can see the script on the left-hand side here. There are only 3 scenes in this whole short. There is her in her room. There is the mother coming down the hallway. And then there's the 2 of them in this room together. It's only 2 pages worth of script. It is very, very short. I'm planning to shoot this with family members sometime in the near future. One of the things that I liked that I did here is I changed my layout. So if you were to look at the original video at the start, because this is filmed over the course of, I think, 5 days. If you look at the original, this layout wasn't set up the way that this is. So right now, if you look, there's a tab here in the top left called layout, and then there's shading and compositing. Really all I need for this is layout and shading. And I changed the basic layout so that I could put the text editor over here with my script in it in fountain format, as well as a little notepad to kind of keep myself on point and going in the right direction. And you see here again, failure after failure after failure. So I spent that time going through and trying to figure out how to do the cloth animation, the cloth simulation onto the character. And it takes me much longer than it should, despite the fact that I spent some time doing this. Some basic things like not having collision on the character. It's falling right through her. Finally get it. And I'm looking at this, and this is one of those instances. Another thing that I've learned here is that I need to not be so focused on making things perfect. Because let's be honest here, most storyboards, people get away with stick figure characters. And if stick figure characters are good enough, this does not have to be at the level of detail that I feel the need to put into these things. So when I was putting that sheet down, I noticed that her hair was sticking out. And there was a part of me that was just like, I probably spent a good 5 or 6 minutes just like screwing around with the sheet, trying to get it up and over her head and making it work appropriately. So I've moved over here. What did I move to? I moved to a new scene because I wanted to try something. I had the idea of like, lots of kids have these lights in their room that have like stars and shit that, you know, project up onto the ceiling and onto the walls and stuff. And I wanted to see if I could make a basic version of that and try to make it work. So I've got this circle that I took a whole bunch of the faces out of and then stuck a cube inside of it. Sorry, a sphere. Stuck a cube inside of it with an emission shader on it. So it is emitting light, and then putting it within this giant cube that's doing some volumetric stuff. And I just couldn't get it to work. And that was another instance where I spent time working on something and went like, is this important? Are those stars going to make a difference in terms of what I'm trying to achieve for getting the storyboards together? And the answer was absolutely no. It wasn't important at all. So what's supposed to happen in this scene is that she's under there, she hears some noises, she pulls the sheet down, she screams. Very simple, very straightforward. And this became another instance where I'm trying to screw around and trying to figure out how to actually pull the cloth off her and get that cloth simulation to go. And it's pointless. And I spend so much time trying to do this. And my actual result here is that I just move the sheet away. I fix the simulation so that it doesn't move. It's just the same position it's in the whole time. And then eventually I just move it off screen. So it's outside of the room, it's out in the void, and you don't see it anymore. And you'll see that as I start to, like, I'm moving it around here, trying to get it to do what I want it to do. And it's just not going to work that way. I'm sure I could get it to do that way. There's probably some way of, you know, friction and hooks or some kind of displacement thing where I could totally have it pull down in front of her. Is that worth the time that I'm going to spend to, like, just to get a couple of still frames out of it? It doesn't matter. So move it out of the way, get the shots that I need to, call it a day, right? Spending a little bit of time here, just moving her around. I'm trying to get her roughly looking in the direction that she's going to need to look at. And that's all I'm trying to do here so that I can get that framed appropriately. Also, since I'm using the tablet as a light source, and I plan to try and use the tablet as a light source, I don't know if it's going to work or if it's just not going to be bright enough if I have to do something else. I think even if I put a plain white screen on a tablet and turn up the brightness as much as I possibly can, I still don't know that's going to cast enough light to make a huge difference for this. This is what I needed. My lighting works. I know that I can light it that way. It should be pretty interesting. You should be able to get a decent shot out of it. Awesome. So go through those steps. It's basically just a gimbal push in, and we're done. Moving out to the hallway. So this is the second scene here. I need to get my second character mesh imported into the project and get her moving down the hallway. So all that should be happening in this scene is that she's been awoken by her screaming daughter, and she's charging down the hallway to find out what's going on. Spending a little bit of time screwing around with lighting here, and I'm not entirely sure why I did that. I'm sure there was a reason. I think I was looking at the ambient light in the area, and I wanted to see what was actually there. So I just went through and rendered that first scene and a couple shots here just to see what it looked like. Bring in my other character, scale them relevant to each other so that they're scaled within the scene. Get her into that hallway. A decent pose out of her, not, you know, sliding down the hallway in T-pose. That would be a little strange. Put in a couple points there just down the hallway. I probably could have just put 2 frames in there and let the frame interpolation get me from one point to another. Just move the camera in sync with her. I could have just done the 2 frames for both of them. Another one of those things that I'm kind of learning as I go. Getting those things together so that I'm doing the least amount of work possible. So this was fun. I went to reset her pose. And things went a little wacky with the rig. Her knees were all turned to the side. Her right wrist was, her right hand was pointing 180 degrees in the wrong direction. Her right arm, I think, was almost 360 degrees rotated in the wrong direction. So I had to do a little work to get her back into a normal pose again, which was a little strange. And I run into this again because, again, I'm still learning this and I'm still figuring out how to make this work for me. I could have saved the pose. And I do that way towards the end. But this is good because it means that I'll remember this when I'm actually working on my brand new Hell storyboards, right? This is, as much as I'm planning on doing this film, these storyboards are really just a test bed for doing the storyboards in a brand new Hell and trying to get more efficient with that process. She comes into the room, so we've moved over to the third scene here. She's opening the door, she comes in. I get my little shot here, so it's kind of just a medium bordering on close with an up angle. I think I move it in a little bit as we move forward here. Playing a lot with just kind of going back and forth and figuring out what I want. Realizing that that lighting may not actually work for what I want. She seems a little dark when she comes into that room, and there is a lamp on that night table that has a color changing bulb in it. So I can really put whatever I want in here. It is a practical light in this sense. And you see that here, I've put it a little bit blue, and I went through a couple frames there just to see how it looks on Mommy's face and how it lights up the room in general. I will probably end up using that light to see what I need to see in that room. It will also help me define where I put other lights as well to try and just give that room a little bit of openness and a little bit of space. I'm going to have to light it bright and pull it back in post when I start doing the color pass on it. So I'm writing in my shots here, just as notes in Fountain, so that they don't clutter up the actual script when I view it in a screenplay editor like Fade In, or when I convert it to a PDF and look at it that way. But those notes are in there if I ever need to look at them so that I can walk through and figure out where I was planning on doing that, which I do need later on. As I start going through and putting together my outputs from this process, I want to know roughly where the page 8ths are, right? So that first shot starts at, kind of that first page 8th on the first page and goes through to the 5th or the 6th page 8th. So, 1.1 to 1.6, that's a very easy way for me to look at that shot and go, okay, I know where this needs to live. When I start doing my shot list and correlating my storyboard images to my shot list, it makes it much easier to look at something in front of me and go, did I get that? Yes or no? Do I have what I need to move on? Yes or no? Which is going to be really invaluable on this shoot, since this is going to be a 3-person shoot. Mummy, the kid, and myself. So I'll be doing all the video and all the audio myself. The plan is to put a couple of wireless lavs on them and just run that into a Zoom H5, and then I'll do all the camera work myself. There's a note in here where I say, I don't think Evie moves at this point. And it's pretty true. Like at this point, she kind of sits back in the corner. She's got her knees up in her chest. She's pushed away as far as she can be from the closet. I just quickly modeled a flashlight there. This is one of those things where I could have gone to Blend Swap and I could have grabbed a model and put it in there. But like, it is such a simple thing to model super quickly if you have kind of basic knowledge of just how to model things. You take a cylinder, you extrude it a couple ways, and you're done. Put an emission shader on the end of it, throw a light on it so that you get a spotlight wherever you're pointing it, and that's it. You're done. This was really easy, and it was valuable to actually get that in there, especially since, as we've been talking throughout this, I've said over and over again, lighting is going to be important for this. So I want to have some of my lighting figured out in advance. So we got a little spot on there, and I'm just trying to get a sense of how this whole shot is going to lay out. I really want her to be pointing at the closet because that's why she has the flashlight. So having her pointing that flashlight at the closet, backed into the corner, lit up by her tablet. I needed to put the shader back on there. I don't know why I took it off, but I needed to get it back on there and just get something lined up that looks pretty decent. So I've got a lot of movement so far. The first shot is kind of a gimbal push in, and then the second shot is that follow gimbal down the hallway. There's this, which is my first static shot, the one just on Mommy here. And I'm playing a little bit with where that camera placement is, but I saved the frame just in case so that I could go back and fix it if I needed to, and I needed to. And then this next shot here, the plan is to have Mommy come over to the bed and sit down. And I didn't want to have multiple cuts. Like, I don't want to have a whole bunch of coverage and then try to piece that together in editing. I kind of want to know what I want before I even go into it. And what I wanted to have was a reverse of that opening shot. I wanted to have a gimbal pull back shot and have Mummy come and sit on the bed as part of that shot. Whether I'll be able to do this when we actually go into do it for the day, who knows? But I like the way that it sets up, and I wanted to get it working appropriately. This is another great example of me just not being super comfortable or knowing exactly how to get things done. I spend a lot of time just messing with this rig for the Mummy character. You'll see it multiple times as I go through here where it's like, tweak this thing and tweak that thing and trying to get them working. And I think I have a better sense of how to get some of this done now. I've figured out some ways to move things around as I've been working through this. So I think setting up the things for Brand New Hell are going to go a lot smoother because I'm using the same process there. I'm using Mixamo character meshes. I'm using the Mixamo auto rig to get things together so that that rig is there. It's the same rig across all the characters, so it should be easy. This is another thing that I liked that I did on this, and I've saved this as a template for myself so that I can do this for any storyboarding projects that I do. That text editor in the bottom left, aside from having the one in the top left so you can look at the script and work through the script without having to have a separate program open. Wonderful, fantastic, I love it. Having something in the bottom left so that you can keep track of what you're doing is great. I mean, once I got over denigrating myself in the comments down there, and actually started focusing on how do I make this easier as I continue forward. Getting those notes down there, knowing what those shots are going to be, knowing what my remaining to-do list looks like was very, very helpful having that down there. So once we've pulled out, my next shot here is going to be kind of a point of view shot of the Evie character looking towards the closet. Mummy comes over, sits down on the bed. When she gets up, she moves over to the closet, and we switch to Evie's point of view here. So we've got a medium to medium long shot across the room with the flashlight on her, standing over at the closet, opening the door a little bit, looking inside and being like, I don't know what to tell you, kid. I don't see anything in here. Switching back to a shot. So basically she gets pulled into the closet. This is what happens in the story. She's over there. She gets pulled into the closet. The door closes. There's some crunching and smacking and wet kind of crazy sounds. And then she comes back up again. That's all you need to know about essentially what happens in the story. We're basically done at that point. So she goes over to the closet. Looks pretty decent from what I've got there. Always tweaks to do there, but we're trying to get basics here, right? We're trying to make something that will work in the future. So she goes over to the closet. She kind of leans down a little bit to look in, gets pulled into the closet. We switch back over to Evie because I want her to move up, right? So we've got this point of view where we're looking kind of waist high on the Mummy character towards the closet. I want to have it pan down and you get to see her feet get pulled in and the door closed. And then she sits back, right? So we go back to this shot here of her. One of the things that I was struggling with here was getting that character out of the way and just trying to move them away from the frame so that they were out of our way. We didn't see them after that point. Move the Evie character up, get 2 frames there so she's kind of back and forward, and that helps us see that kind of tilt down. She's getting a little bit more context for what she's seeing. We will get to that momentarily after I get Mummy out of the way here. I need to basically get her set up in the closet as well. So this is going to be another one of those instances where I reset the rig and all of a sudden things are not where they're supposed to be at all. And I have to reset the character. I think this is where I got smart and I actually saved the pose to the pose library. So there's a pose library. You can set up multiple poses and recall them on command, which is really cool. I knew about this beforehand. I just totally forgot to use it here because that would make sense. She's out of the way. I'm playing around here trying to figure out if it has different formatting, syntax highlighting. So I've got a fountain script in there. If it could do syntax highlighting for fountain, that would be wonderful. If it could do markdown, that would also be wonderful. It does not do either by default. I need to do a little bit of research to see if there are supports for that. I really don't want to write a syntax highlighter. I don't think it's a valuable use of my time, so I'm not going to do that. But if there is one out there, that would be really cool, especially if it only did syntax highlighting. That would be great. Spending a little bit of time here, just trying to figure out where Mommy is supposed to be placed, so you really only see her feet. When we shoot this for real, there's going to be clothes in the closet. You're not going to be able to see her when she's sitting back there. The flashlight's just not going to penetrate that deeply, but you will see her feet. So what we want is we pull down, we see the feet pull into the closet, and the door closes over. We go back to Evie. She sits back in to get back into the corner again, and then we will switch back to a POV panning shot following Mummy as she comes out of the closet. So a little bit of context here. At the start of it, she hears a noise. She looks over to the closet and she calls out, anyone there, or whatever she says. I don't remember exactly right now. And she gets shushed by the monster. I also would like to have some kind of FX shot on the eyes. I'm not quite sure how I'm going to do that yet. I think I'm going to do it in Blender, but I'm going to have to test it out first before we get to the shoot, so I know whether I actually want to keep it or not. I think I'll keep the shot regardless. It's a question of whether I'll be able to get the FX shot that I want. So Mummy's starting to come out of the closet here, and I'm just trying to get her into a decent position. It bothers me that it takes a lot of work to get into like weird, awkward positions, but I keep having to remind myself, like, if this was on paper, I would just be doing stick figures. So I'm getting some weird stuff in here. There's automatic interpolation that's happening between some of these frames that I've saved, and I have no idea what it's doing it. So it takes me a little bit of work to kind of massage everything back out again and get it to a point where I'm happy with it. So she opens the closet door, she stands up, she starts walking out without really paying attention to Evie at all, almost like she's not there. And then as Evie calls out to her, she shushes her and then heads out the door. So this whole last section becomes a POV shot from Evie again, basically following Mommy with the flashlight out the door. So this is me trying to get her to put a finger up to her mouth to shush her. I think there are better ways that I could have done this. I wasn't really sure how to do it, and if I had just done the motion with my body and looked at the way that my body moved to do that, it would have been so much easier to get this done. But I wasn't thinking. It was just like, yeah, we'll just keep tweaking parameters until it works, and that's not really the best way to work on this. So I've got her going through all the motions, going out the door closing behind her. Once I get to a point where I'm happy, then I start moving the camera around, and then I move the flashlight to follow her. So we're just setting up those frames for each individual one. I don't know why I took the time to do this frame. I should have moved everything out the door first and then picked up the frame again. But you can see, I grabbed frame 45 there and moved it into frame 47 so that I had roughly the same framing, and I was just moving around to follow it. And now that that's done, I'm moving the flashlight around so that I can follow her out the door. Flashlight's not great, could probably be angled up a little higher. Not really that big of a deal. And this is what I ended up with. So this is, 1080 frames for this, and I'm just transitioning towards them, showing my scene, my shot, what the movement is, and what my pages are. A little blackout there, which is what I'm planning for the edit. Again, the pages that I need, what the movements are, what the shot is, what the scene is. So here's that pullback where Mommy comes and sits down, and then we cut to Mommy walking over to the closet. That's Evie's POV. Looking in the closet. No, I don't see anything. She gets yanked into the closet. She leans in. We do that POV tilt down. We see the legs get pulled in and the door closes over. She moves back into her corner. Door opens. Mommy comes out. And then looks over and shushes her, heads out, closes the door.